Coogs House. All right, we finally have some football to talk about. We got a game coming up. Thanks to preview. Wait a second. You're telling me that there's no spring football game? What in the?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can't step by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way, the latest in the Cougs in your news feed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is good to see you again. I remember doing a giveaway at 1,000 subscribers. We're up over 930. We're doing this every so many subscribers. Next big jump's 1,000. And I feel like as we're approaching 1,000, I have to point out that at 1,000, we'll be giving away a signed Jarris Walker basketball jersey. It's made to be hung up, right? It's that kind of like, the front's just kind of there, but the back has his signature. Walker looks great in the frame, and it can be yours if you subscribe to the channel down below and are liking and commenting on the videos. If after expressing frustrations with the spring football game or lack thereof, you've got nothing else to say, A, I doubt it, say something, but B, tell us if you think a Twinkie is just a dessert corn dog. Okay, so we got a couple things to look at here. In the first segment, I'm going to do kind of an explanation and initial reactions to cancellation. Second segment, I want to talk some about how this was handled. And then the third segment, I want to talk some about, honestly, what I was looking forward to looking at, because that had a lot of notes that is now just a segment of notes. But in the first segment, let's talk some about the spring game getting canceled. Now, there is torrential rain supposed to be coming through Houston all weekend. So stay safe, stay inside, all those kinds of good things. Stay off the roads. You don't have to go anywhere, right? Blah, blah, blah. But this game was canceled for Friday night. Again, kickoff was looking like the event would start at 6:30 based on the most recent stuff. We talked about that in a previous episode, but that was also a little murky, 6:30 or 7. The tweet for this went out at 10 o'clock a.m. On 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time on Thursday, April 6th. So about 32 hours before kickoff was scheduled to happen. And it was just canceled. No reschedule, no nothing, no real explanation except for that it was for inclement weather. Now, a little bit of investigative digging did not take too long to figure out exactly what's going on here. But basically, with the weather, meaning you couldn't play outside without risk of serious injury because of slipping and sliding, those kinds of things. That's not really what spring games are about, right? They're not kind of you push through for that, I guess. Obviously, remember last spring, Alden McCaskill tore his ACL in the spring, in spring practices. So, you don't want to push your luck there. They kind of ran into a different wall. The other hurdle that Houston ran into in rescheduling this would be that they're out of days. The NCAA is very, very strict on their spring practice policies. These are policies put in place, in the last 15 years. They actually have been updated some within that. But the idea being to kind of protect the kids themselves from just being overworked in the spring, because with no game or just the one game in the spring, it'd be really easy to have really grueling practice for 2 months straight. And that's not quite the point. The logistics of that are that once you start spring practice, you got 34 days, but you get 1 day off a week because the NCAA mandates you take 1 day off a week. So it really ends up being closer to 40, but I digress. Days to have 15 total spring practices, and the game counts as one of those. The first day of spring practice was February 28th. Now, if you take off the 1 day a week to factor in the rest day that NCAA mandates, the 34th day you could have a practice was Friday, April 7th, right? That is the last day, the last possible day Houston's allowed to do anything. For what it's worth, the other mandates within that are that only 12 of the 15 can be full contact. You cannot have full contact for the first 3 practices. So that obviously 12 of the 15 being the latter 12. Some sort of a warm-up period to get back into football gear, theoretically. Right? We know the kids are in shape, but you feel me on that. The other thing is that you can only have 8 of those 12 be full tackle practices. So, take that as it may. Some of those full contact practices will be more like sprint throughs or like blocking made drills. Those drills may be the same, but not necessarily like full speed tackling, live kind of concepts. I have to say that's honestly a little bit like better, and I wish they had just said that they were at the end of their NCAA list of days, because the first initial reaction to the canceling of the spring game was, why didn't they reschedule this, right? And if they had just said, we literally are not allowed to play on Saturday, as like Friday night's last night, I think they'd have had a little more sympathy out of all fans involved, right? If they just said, Friday night's it. Okay, Friday night's it. Whatever. This, can we move indoors? Like other questions would have arisen, but they wouldn't have had the immediate reaction of, well, why can't you just reschedule the event? Everyone's looking forward to watching the quarterback battle, right? The other thing I think is interesting is that it does appear through sources, and then other people were putting theirs out there, but it sounds like that there will be an indoor facility, full go practice. I imagine there'll be large elements of that are scrimmaging, because the coaches want to evaluate the guys as well. The recruits that are on campus this weekend will attend that, it appears. And so I'm sure you'll see like different recruit pay. If you're the kind of guy that follows kids online, you'll see the recruits posting that kind of stuff. I'm sure that they are there. They will get to see how that kind of stuff runs, and they will get to see their potential future teammates in action. And I think that is important, that the spring football game can be a big recruiting tool. I would argue that part of that recruiting tool is the game day atmosphere, but I digress, right? The deal is, if they're going to have that indoor practice facility, you could not fit, in theory, fans, families, media, etc. And then you run into the question of, well, who do you leave out? Who do you bring in? I mean, if you only bring in media, do you upset the families of the kids and the fans? If you only bring in the fans, do you upset the media and get a bunch of bad stuff written about you? If you don't bring in the families of the kids, do they take their kids and leave? It's the transfer portal. It's 2023, right? Who knows what the right answer to that would be? But that, I think, is the logistical hurdles that you're going through at the indoor practice facility, and doing anything worth getting people in to watch this event. It's a practice facility. It's not made for spectators, right? And then I've got one, and I saw that Pod Slam and Jam put out one. People have been saying that, I guess, there was an attempt to contact NRG Stadium just down the road a little bit. I mean, obviously, they just had the Final Four last weekend, and they have, it looks like, some sort of conventions at NRG are next weekend, but this weekend's actually open and free. But it appears like, I'm assuming, this is my assumption based on what I'm seeing and reading and hearing, that it looks like that might have been kind of too late. Like, hey, you can't tell us about putting a football game in here 36 hours ahead of time. Poo-poo, dismissed. There may be more negative connotations that I don't know. And then ultimately, there will be a media availability with Holgerson and company on Monday. I'd imagine, again, assumptions, I'd imagine that is just coaches, as technically, once players are done with their 15 practices, the players are done, right? Or done. We know they work out. We know they go out and throw this, but they're done with us by then. So I imagine that's just coaches, and I'm imagining there'll be a lot of questions for Dana Holgerson about that. Now, this was supposed to be the weekend that kind of jumpstarted the 2023 football season for the Houston Cougars. But for a lot of people, this is also the weekend that is wrapping up NBA basketball, and the NBA playoffs are almost here, and it is the perfect time to download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book, because FanDuel offers new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. I just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. The lone playoff series, as of the recording of this, that is officially set, is in the Eastern Conference. You're going to have the New York Knicks playing the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but former Houston Cougar Quentin Grimes for the New York Knicks is on a tear. Had 36 points 2 nights ago. He's played really, really well in the last 4 or 5 weeks. We saw him play pretty well in March in Houston Cougar jersey. He's playing pretty well in March and April in New York Knicks jersey as well. They've got the Knicks as underdogs, though, at plus 166 to win that series. The Knicks, whether it's Quentin being a older guy with deep college runs, but they really have also Quigley and Randall and guys, Thibodeau, that have made NBA playoff appearances before. They're playing Cleveland. Cleveland's new to the dance, and Cleveland's very good. I don't mean to say they're not, but Cleveland's pretty new here. And I'm thinking that's an underdog worth taking. It might go 7 games, obviously, but got to imagine the Madison Square Garden's kind of electric, and they win their home games. They only got to win 1 in Cleveland. I'm thinking I'm taking the New York Knicks, and I'm thinking you should take it at FanDuel as well. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay, so don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so now that I've done enough of like the calm voice talking about the cancellation of the spring game, let's get to why this is upsetting. Frankly, it's upsetting because it's a PR nightmare. You're avoiding playing football in the rain. That doesn't make any sense. I think the other thing here is that like this kind of feeds into this idea that like they have not cared about promoting the spring football game with a legitimate quarterback battle going into the first season in the Big 12, right? All of those reasons should make this a primetime event. They should be pushing to get this thing on like ESPN or like the real deal, much less ESPN Plus, right? We talked about before how there are, I was very, we'll say, kindly updated in the comment section of my episode before about this, but there are roughly 40 games available on an ESPN slew of online networks, if not ESPN2 and ESPN regular, right? I mean, Georgia's putting theirs on ESPN2 and Colorado's got theirs sold out and on ESPN, the main channel. But a lot of people have them on ACC networks or their ESPN Plus or whatever, right? Their conference networks or whatever. Houston is not. Houston not the only school of its size that is not. I mean, BYU has their own TV network, obviously, but like Georgia Southern is on ESPN Plus, right? Like this is not some like only the big programs get it kind of thing. Houston's got to work their way up. Even it feels like it's more about does your school want to work through finding the infrastructure, because some schools are and some schools aren't. And it feels like in not televising it, Houston is not. Further, televising would have made this indoor practice facility thing kind of feeling like, you know, back in the COVID pandemic when they just played in empty stadiums, because they could have used cameras set up in there because they've got the camera because they film practice, right? They film practice to break down the film on their own. And frankly, I like the all 22 camera angle. They could have just played that on ESPN Plus as the way this thing goes. And, you know, if you wanted to have the local play-by-play guy do it, great. If not, call me, but whatever, right? Like those kinds of things would have worked. And that was clearly not something they ever even thought of because they weren't pushing to get this thing on ESPN Plus in the first place. That's a darn shame, and we'll call it that. But that's a shame that they've been having about this game for a long time. That feels like this is the nail in the coffin of the ultimate letdown on that. I feel like this is also something you see in the social media presence. I know my older audience, social media might not mean anything, and frankly, my younger audience, maybe like Ainsworth, Twitter is not the biggest deal anymore. But in looking just at like the Houston Cougar football Twitter handle, right, in tweets they've put out since spring practice started on February 28th, right? They've tweeted about spring practice 17 times. They've had 15 practices, right? And those 17 tweets have some multimedia, some pictures, some videos, some whatever, but nothing too crazy, right? That's not a whole lot of promotion. That's not once a day. That's barely once a practice, right? That's not great hype train either. Again, if you're building this program up and going into the Big 12, Instagram page is more or less the same, right? For reference and how few tweets those are, they've only got 2 tweets since the initial tweet that said the date of the game. Only 2 tweets pumping up this idea of going to the spring game on Friday. Admittedly, in the last couple of days, if they knew this was coming, they might not have wanted to pump people up. But at all over the course of spring practice, they only had 2 tweets pumping up the spring football game. They had 4 tweets in the same window about the Houston Cougar men's basketball team beating the Auburn football team on the Houston football Twitter page, right? The Houston football Twitter page had more tweets about beating Auburn in basketball because of the fun similarities between beating Auburn in football and Birmingham a couple years ago in the bowl game, They had more tweets about beating Auburn in basketball than they had about getting ready for their own fun spring football game, right? I think that that's all disappointing because it clearly means that there's no push to make this a bigger deal. And if you make this a bigger deal, you can't cancel it, right? We're upset because they're not going to get to see it. I can see this, I can see that. I'm going to enjoy it, and I can get to celebrate. Like, oh my God, did you see what Lucas Cole just did? Oh my God, did you see what Alex McCaskill just did? Oh my God, did you see? Like, we don't get to do the Donovan Smith thing. Like, oh my God, he's going to be so great. They don't do all that at all because we don't get to see the game. And then we actually have to take the coach's word for it on a lot of things. And there are things I like about Dana, the things I don't. The staff is fairly tight-lipped about those kind of positional battles and all of that. And so I don't have confidence that on Monday we'll know much more. We'll talk about it, right? We'll talk about the conference because we do those things, but I just don't have confidence that we're going to know a lot more. I'm going to have to read between lines on that, and that's whole big thing. It's also frustrating to cancel this, not just because it was a poorly marketed event, and not just because if you just put the darn thing on TV would fix this whole thing, but because in the city of Houston, in April, in a sport that's outside, there was clearly no plan B. Not at least a plan B for people to enjoy. Because rumor is that this NRG contact came out way, way too late, right? There was no thought about how can we get people inside of the stadium, right? Forget ESPN Plus. If you're trying to get people inside the indoor practice facility, just stream the all 22 angle. Just stream it on the Houston sports athletic pages. Like just do that, right? Also not a thing they're going to do, right? There's no event on Friday. They're doing a media event on Monday. Why not do that before the game on Friday? Because people are already planning on coming to campus, right? Or do something on Friday after the game, some sort of a big celebration or whatever. And like, when you don't have to like take up so much of the field with practice and drills and stuff like that, like people can flood in. Not doing that either. Like those things are not part of the planning process for Houston. And I get that NRG maybe need more time, more heads up. They are between fairly large events. I get that Minute Maid probably doesn't want you playing inside their stadium because they're in the middle of the season. The Houston Astros are actually on the road this weekend, and I think that isn't, we've seen fun football played in baseball stadiums before. I don't know that Minute Maid is the best place to do that, but again, like it is indoors. I don't understand how there's no plan B for April in Houston when there's gonna be rain. Like this is just like you don't have anyway. There's gonna be rain. And I don't know if this falls on Pesman. I don't know if this falls on Dana. I don't know if this falls on PR. I don't know who this falls on as far as getting these things fixed. But it seems fairly consistent that these are the kinds of things that the Houston football program does not have that like kind of the basketball program does. Now, obviously, there's not going to be a rain delay, except for, I guess there has been in the last couple of years, a couple of weather delays on pro basketball in Texas because of the snowstorms or whatever. But generally speaking, there's not going to be like a rain delay that, rains out a basketball game. But the PR on that side has been pretty strong, right? And people are, you can tell by the clicks and views on this podcast that people appreciate the basketball program and get invested in the basketball program because of it. It helps that they're really good too, right? But they are following along with the storylines. Again, I don't know if it's Pesman. I don't know if it's Holgerson. And I'm frankly not quick to cast blame on any one person involved in this process. People on Twitter and people on message boards went after Dana. And frankly, Dana might not have been so super upset about it. I guess those people might be right too. I can totally see Dana being sitting in his office, breaking down game tape, trying to figure out what he's going to do, and someone knocking on his door saying, "Hey, we're canceling it." And I don't know what his reaction would be, all that kind of stuff, but I can totally see that being what happens here. And like, it might not have been his call. We don't have any evidence as to whose call it was. What I do know is if Pesman wants to take some heat off of Dana because he just gave Dana a bunch of money not that long ago, and like I could see him maybe wanting to protect that as an asset and be like, no, I made the right decision here, I promise. Pesman would own this, right? Pesman would say as the AD, listen, this is my call, folks. It didn't look safe to play. I said the best alternative option was to go inside, but that meant y'all can watch, right? Like, that's cool too. Frankly, for what it's worth, they have not publicized that the thing is going inside. There just looks like a bunch of people talking about this indoor practice that recruits are going to, and it may just be a true practice, but imagine there's some scrimmaging things going on. If you want to put on communications, you want to put on HR, you put on whomever, put it on athletic training staff. Put it on somebody. Let somebody wear this. And if it's Dana, you might need to let him wear it too. Now, in the third segment, I did say I want to talk some about what I wanted to watch in this game because I think those questions are still lingering. So let's talk some about what that was going to be. What I want to see in this game, I mean, the first segment, the first episode the other day when this game was still happening, was I want to see the quarterback battle. I want to see what Coley could do in the offense after a couple, almost a year in it. I want to see what Don Smith could do after a couple months in it. I wanted to see what the receiving core looked like without Tank Dell and who was making catches and who was the primary target. I'm assuming it's Matthew Golden, but who was primary target, right? I want to see those kind of things out of the quarterbacks. And frankly, literally who got the first snap. So I guess that is to say that I had those interests as much as anybody. I talked about that ad nauseum the other day, and you can get my thoughts on that in the last episode. One of the things I really want to watch is I want to watch Alton McCaskill run. We get edited clips, some about what he does, and then for media availability at practice, he's doing very mundane running back drills. It's great to see him. He took his green jersey off, so he's actually looks like he's full contact in practice. But I'd like to see what he's looking like running the full speed with the football. He just tore his knee again, almost exactly, I guess, just over a year ago. And it was a non-contact ACL injury. Those are awful, right? But it's also not 1984. Like, they're not the career killers they used to be for running backs. And so what does his one cut look like? Does he favor one side or the other? Is he running full speed downhill in through contact? Like, what does he look like as a runner? And does he look like the stud standout freshman running back he was not that long ago? On a similar note, I kind of want to know, when he wasn't toting the rock, who was his backup? Are they going with Stacey Sneed? Are they going with Brandon Campbell? What are they looking at those positions? Because Tajon Henry did handle a lot of that load when he was healthy a year ago. And so what's going to look like this fall? I want to look at some about the personnel. I mentioned in previous episodes that I was looking forward to seeing in the merging of what Dana Holgorsen does and what Iman Yagavi does. What are they going to end up in? They showed some in spring ball, the spring practice that we got to see what you call 11 personnel, where you have one tight end and one running back, 11, 1 and 1. But I know Nagavi really likes more of like a 20 personnel or even a 21 personnel, meaning two running backs as one of them, like a fullback, H-back, and potentially a tight end as well, because he likes using them in the blocking schemes. You can go back and watch some Tulane tape a year ago, and that's what he seemed to like to do. And I thought it was interesting that the fix that Houston was doing was having a big receiver in the field and Joseph Manjack in the slot, and then he could easily motion in and be a blocker in the backfield if needed. I could also see, though, because of the depth of wide receiver room, you using said big wide receiver as the blocker in the backfield and being in more like a 10 personnel, but being able to motion into that 20 and then having your extra receivers in the field, because there are some receivers on the Houston roster and only more coming when high school kids graduate that did not finish in December. And so what personnel did I see them in? Not necessarily what receivers start, because I think Mikhail Harrison Pilot starts. We talked about that before. You can go back and check out that episode to see why. I do think he starts somewhere on this team. And so in looking at that, the personnel to me is more important to tell me where he fits in, not that he fits in, but that could be my own thing. And then the final big question I had, they're all offense, I guess, which is bad because we also get 77 points to SMU. Maybe I should have some more questions on defense, but I just wanted to watch that. That's just, are we better? The other question I have is on offense. I want to look at who's starting on the offensive line, because we thought we had something set in stone, and we're kind of losing guys, slowly bleeding. And we also have a new O-line coach, so guys get moved around. I would assume that was going to go left tackle Patrick Paul, left guard Lance. I was thinking Lance Robinson moves over there from right tackle, Jack Freeman at center, Tyler Johnson at right guard, and Jalen Garth, the transfer from Texas that was ineligible last fall but is back and ready to roll. I was going to have him at right tackle. He's a little bit longer, leaner body, and so I was going to move, again, Lance Robinson back over left guard. But I also know that there's like a senior named Tank Jenkins, who I think rotates in enough last season to be warrant filling in a spot, especially with Cameron Johnson gone. And I know that at some point they're going to ask redshirt freshmen like Carson Jones or they call Demetrius Hunter Pancake. Like, that's for a reason. I don't think it's because he eats pancakes, right? Like, who are they going to put in at those other spots too? And those are younger guys that like you and I hadn't got to see at the college level. And so could we see them play their way up? I do think I've seen Pancake involved in a lot of clips if you're paying attention. So, like, does that mean he's in the first unit, or is he just by happenstance the guy out there? I say all that to say that I am disappointed. And if you're disappointed, please air your grievances in the comments. I'm not going to take it personally. You're not mad at me. You're mad at the university, obviously. So write it down below, or you can find me to talk about it at Ainsworth 512, PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all your social media handles. Wherever you talk to people online, I'm at Ainsworth 512. Thank you all so much for listening to Locked On Cougs and making Locked On Cougs your first listen day. Again, remember, subscribe down below, and we'll get you a signed Jarris Walker jersey potentially. You just got to be subscribed, liking, commenting, etc. to do that. So make sure you do that when you get to 1,000 subscribers. Someone's getting it. If you're looking for a second listen of the day, I've enjoyed this week listening to Locked On Big 12. They're following a lot of the drama across the conference and who's in, who's out, and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you go check out Josh Neighbors and Locked On Big 12. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day.